What they're not taught is cash flow. Who's taught cash flow? The people in the marketplace who have a stall. This is what the original trading came up to. It was all about cash flow. Did you have enough at the end of the day to both eat as well as go buy more inventory for the next day? And we've gotten away from that. And I believe that we need to get back to cash. People say cash is king, but they treat it like a pauper.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives? Because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. And we do that through one-on-one coaching or training for the team. On this podcast, you will hear insights and advice from communication experts from around the world. My guest today is David Safir. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about David. 1, he has done business in over 40 countries. 2, he restructured a division of a Fortune 100 company from years of losses to profitability in 1 year. Wow. He's a magician. And 3, he met his wife of 38 years during their high school musical where he was the lead and she was the student director. Now, I hope that you have reruns of that play from time to time just to bring back the memories. David Safir, welcome to Your Intended Message.
George, it's great being on your podcast, and Your Intended Message is such a fascinating topic where people are saying things that they don't really mean. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
David, I know that you're going to offer some insights that we haven't looked at before. And the discussion, the communication, the message is all around money. And you would think that money in business is a critical conversation that people get good at. However, I think usually the conversation is either around revenue or generating more revenue or reducing expenses. However, there's a side of the conversation that they miss, and that's what we're going to address today, and that's the cash flow conversation. David, why do you think that conversation is overlooked so much?
Wow, that's a great question, George. I don't think anybody's asked me in that way, but here's my estimation. Accounting is what people are taught in business school. Accounting is not cash flow. Accounting is theoretical in nature. They call it accounting theory, accounting principles, accounting rules that may or may not have anything to do with reality. And that's what so many of our business leaders are taught is accounting. What they're not taught is cash flow. Who's taught cash flow? The people in the marketplace who have a stall. This is what the original trading came up to. It was all about cash flow. Did you have enough at the end of the day to both eat as well as go buy more inventory for the next day? And we've gotten away from that. And I believe that we need to get back to cash. People say cash is king, but they treat it like a pauper.
And of course, if you treat it like a pauper, you soon will be one.
Great conclusion. Great logical conclusion. Yes.
And yes, I remember the phrase cash is king, but however, why did we get away from that?
Again, I'll go back to accounting. What I really focus in on is small business owners. I work for very large companies. You mentioned I worked for a Fortune 100. I didn't worry about it. I was a general manager for a division in Latin America. We worried about accounts receivable, but I never got a phone call saying, David, we're going to run out of money if you don't collect this. What they would say is they'd look at the accounting/finance statistic and say, your receivable is now over 45 days for this client or over 90 days for that client. Those are all accounting terms that don't focus in on cash. We are geared towards providing units of production for large corporations. And then eventually those people get fed up and sick and tired of working for the big 4 accounting firms or large corporations. They go out and say, I'm going to go help a small company. I'm going to set up my own business. I'm going to set up, do taxes. And they don't learn that accounting oftentimes is completely disconnected from the realities a business owner is facing. And so there's a trickle-down effect from going from universities to large corporations down to small corporations. Everybody's talking accounting. Nobody's talking about cash.
And David, I've learned over the years that the owners of small business, when they're going through difficult times, one of their biggest fears is that they can't make payroll at the end of the week. And not many people can relate to that. No one who's never run a business can relate to that concept. How am I going to make payroll?
Mm-hmm.
And when people come to you with a cash flow problem but don't recognize it, how do you recognize it? What questions do you ask? Where do you probe? Where do you say, does it hurt when I do this?
Payroll is one of the big things that gets companies in trouble. All right. And there's certain types of loans. You've probably seen the ads. Money tomorrow, no credit application. I won't talk a lot about it, but stay away from those. What I've learned subsequently is there are payroll lenders. And if anybody there is out there listening who has issues making payroll, let me know. Get in touch with me on LinkedIn. Contact me. I know a very, very reputable payroll lender that can help you out, that they will literally lend you money for 2 to 4 weeks. That's it. You got to set it up in advance. They can't do it tomorrow. You need 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Anyhow, so I just wanted to mention that since you brought it up. I can't remember your question now, George.
When they have a problem, what are you looking for? What are the symptoms?
Okay.
Where do you squeeze and say, does this hurt yet?
So it's funny because people come to us with symptoms. When I say us, I teach this. And this is one of the things I need to teach is they will tell you the symptoms. I cannot make payroll in 2 weeks. Well, if you fix that symptom, but don't fix the root cause, they won't be able to make payroll 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, etc. So some of the things you're looking at are financial statistics. Things like I mentioned, accounts receivable. So they have an accounts receivable problem. Generally, it's not a receivables problem. Generally, they have a systems problem. So you got to go to the root cause of what's causing that. Or they have a profit margin problem, which is the difference between the sales price and the cost of the product or service that you're delivering. Now, again, that's just a symptom. You've got to dig in and figure out, why do you have a profit margin problem? Or they have an expense problem. Or these are all accounting terms, a lot of them. And you're looking at a profit and loss. And it's not on the profit and loss. This is one of the huge challenges. We're depending on accounting reports. The first client, guy's name was Wally. He handed me his accounting reports. First meeting, he said, David, here's my accounting reports. My accountant told me I made $250,000 on $2.1 million in sales. That's pretty good. That was after all the expenses. Where's my cash? My response was, well, what did your accountant say? He has no idea how to explain this to me. So we had to dig it up. And you know what? It wasn't on the P&L. Where it was on his balance sheet. So now you got 2 reports you're dealing with, right? So what's the message of a P&L? How healthy is the company? That's the image we all have. The unintended message of a P&L is, if you've got profits, you're in good shape. Well, the reality is, A, it was accrual, which I'm not going to explain what that is. It's a type of accounting that's meant for large companies. It should be a best case cash basis. But you know what? Even on a cash basis, you may or may not pick things up because of rules. I'll give you an example, George. I've got a computer right here that's 5 years old. According to the IRS, what's it worth? 0. Because it's 5 years old. And I'm sitting there going, oh, wait a minute. It's good enough to be running at very high internet speeds, running a camera, running a microphone, and we're having an interview. How is that worth 0? And I could keep going on and on and on talking about these accounting principles that really screw with your mind unless you're well trained. And then we get the people who say, well, everybody who's a business owner should learn this stuff. So they should all go to school for a couple of years before they're allowed to start a business. We'd be dead in the water. They are technicians with an entrepreneurial itch, and we should be sending clear messages. You know what's clear? Cash. How much money do you have in the bank today versus a period beforehand, whether it was last week, last month, last year, or today versus projecting next week, next month, next year. And the difference between the two is weekly, monthly, annual cash flow.
David, when you talk to business owners, do you get a lot of pushback from their accountants?
No. But I can tell you why. It's because the accountants don't know how to do this, what I'm talking about, and they don't agree with me. They understand. They have to take a step back and say, oh, yeah, that was accounting theory. That wasn't accounting fact, right? That was accounting principle number 53, not accounting fact 53. And so sometimes that's a little bit of the pushback, a little bit. But once I say all we're trying to do is help this guy and help understand, can we have enough cash? And I'm helping, I work with accountants, I work with the bookkeepers to try to fix a company. That's the simple answer. Can I give you the more complete answer?
Please do.
The more complete answer is, George, half the companies I work with, the business owner decides to replace their bookkeeper or accountant because they're the root cause of why the books are screwed up sometimes, because they don't have the skill sets, because they've gotten the company to a certain level. There's too many, especially bookkeepers are homegrown. They learn by osmosis. They took an online class. They don't understand accounting. And I do coaching at a high level for chart of accounts, et cetera. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a bookkeeper. I'm a business person. And so we end up replacing people sometimes for the good of the business. And when people go, David, that's terrible. How do you get rid of somebody? Well, sometimes the option is you ask one person to leave versus shutting down a business. So you make hard choices now to have easy choices in the future.
I'm curious, David, do you use credit cards?
I do.
And now the reason I asked is because recently I took my dad to my 92-year-old dad to the bank, and he was paying his bills at the bank, and at the same time he got cash. And then I took him to the grocery store, and I noticed he paid for everything in cash. So it was pretty simple for him to figure out his cash flow because he just checks his wallet at the end of the day. Is there still cash there?
That's right.
And do you suggest that more people maybe start using cash more often?
I think it's a great idea. So Dave Ramsey, I've never been like a diehard fan, but I've listened to him enough, for over a period of a couple months. I really listened, and we started using the envelope method that he prescribes to. It's great. It's really great. Now, we still use the envelope method. It's just on a spreadsheet. But I know what I'm doing, right? And I spend a half an hour every single week doing cash flow modeling for my family, and then another half an hour doing it for my business, which is all it really takes. And then also having savings. That's a basic principle. He suggests, I haven't listened to him for a while, at the time was $1,000 in cash. And all of a sudden your problems disappear. You know what? He was right. This is like 20 years ago when we were struggling, and we got up to $1,000 and our problems went away. Now we still have problems. Well, they were challenges, no longer problems. So those principles, it's the same thing. Every business should have cash reserves. How much? If you're running $1 million a year business, $1,000 is not enough. It probably is 10,000 or 15,000. You just need to understand your business. But absolutely, cash can be good. Now that I've said that, I'm going to suck it all back from a business perspective. If you're not a sole proprietor, cash is very dangerous because it's too easy to misappropriate cash. And so you want to be very, very careful and have systems in place. And I'm not the person to tell you about how to do that. It's just a bit of a warning. You don't want to have your employees have access to cash.
Yes, because you wonder why it takes them 3 hours to come back from lunch.
Well, it's much harder to reconcile. And you've got documentation built in when you're running a credit card or a debit card, right? Debit cards are the plastic equivalent of cash because you're out of money, right? You can't overspend. You can for a day or two, but even there, you can protect yourself in a couple ways.
So the CEO, the owner of the business, needs to understand the language of cash flow. And when you talk to them, what are some of the questions or phrases that you suggest they become more familiar with, and perhaps this becomes part of their weekly routine?
So I've already told you one, which is cash flow. What is it? Is the difference between the beginning and ending balance over a period of time. And we've got to remember that everything is time dependent on cash flow. That's one of the differences. And so when you go out there and look at expert advice, too much of it is based on short-term cash flow, geared towards companies in trouble. Okay, let me give you an example. If you've got receivables and you want to get them in sooner, they'll say, increase your cash flow, discount it by 5%, and you'll get it in faster, right? George, can you pay me the $10,000 you owe me? I'll give you a $500 discount if you pay me in the next 2 days. Sounds great, right? I mean, and you might have your own problems and say, no, David, I can't. But if you do have the $10,000 to do it in 2 days versus 30, it's a huge return on your investment. That's equivalent to a 60% return in a bank. However, is it truly increasing my cash flow? It is this week. But if I had waited for 30 days, I would have had $500 more. So my short-term cash flow goes up, my long-term cash flow goes down, and my profitability goes down. And if you're running on 10% margins, all of a sudden your profitability was just cut in half by offering that small, what appears to be a small discount. So we've got to be really careful about timeframes. So that's one. The other one is modeling. It's something called the 13-week cash flow model. And it's exactly what it says. The model is what's coming in and what's going out every week for 13 weeks, which happens to be 1 quarter. Banks, when a company's in trouble, will insist on this type of modeling, not when they're giving a loan. For some strange reason, when they're giving a loan, they ask you for accrual-based accounting projections. I did this once with a client. I helped the CFO put together a projection, cash-based. I don't even know if we use a cash model, but a cash-based accounting model. And they said, no. We need accrual basis. And let me tell you, the change was enormous. They would have never given a loan based on the cash basis model. But the accrual basis model looked great. Why? Because what's the terms? 30-day terms. What's the reality? That's the other interesting thing. Cash flow is reality. Reality is, if you go and measure, the average was 45. Some customers were 60 and 90 days. So when you plug that in, you've got backwards cash flow. You needed more and more capital to grow your company. It was never going to catch up. Did they get the loan? Absolutely. They got the loan. 2 or 3 months later, they were out of cash, which is what the first model predicted. And then all of a sudden the bank says, well, give us a cash flow projection. So if it's good enough for a company in trouble, guess how you stay out of trouble? You do a 13-week cash flow model projection and you say, how much cash I'm going to have next week, next month, payroll. Will I have enough money to make payroll? That's how you find out or not. But the best thing is you don't find out 2 weeks ahead of time. You don't run your company by bank account balance. You look out 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, etc., and you can see problems coming. So you've got up to 3 months to fix your challenges before they hit you in the face.
And if we can start looking out 3 months, there should be no surprises.
Well, let me give you a little bit of modification on there, right? Because none of us is a magician. We're not, futurists. Otherwise, we'd be playing the stock market. But what we're taking is past behavior and we're projecting it forward. We know when certain bills are due, etc. But what I can tell you from experience is you can get 1 to 2 weeks within a very small percentage, 1%, 2% accuracy. 2 to 4 weeks, it becomes less accurate. 1 to 2 months, you're going, okay, that's a pretty good estimate. And then 2 months or more, we're making a good, intelligent estimate that it'll get more accurate as it comes in. But the big things, balloon payments, usually a lot of times when the months, the weeks that the, what do we just call it? Payroll and rent or mortgages come together. You get a trampoline effect where your expenses go way up. You can project those and say, why are we have any cash that week? Oh, look, we're paying rent and a payroll at the same time. Let's move all of our other expenses off of that week, push them out, push them in, or pull them in. And so we give ourselves some breathing room around that 1 week, that Friday that you're making payroll. That you can see 3 months out.
Oh, that's interesting, David, because what I'm hearing there is when we know what the payments are we need to make ahead of time, we can schedule them at different times so it's not all happening the same week. Mm-hmm. Even if it was all the same week, it would be convenient for accounting because they could do it all at once. Especially a small company that has a part-time accountant that only comes in once in a while to do the books and do the payroll. And instead of thinking about what's convenient for the accountant, we need to think about what's going to keep the business alive.
Yeah, but you can. But even with an accountant comes in once a month, you just say, great, we're going to use software. And it could be your banking software. It could be something else. We will schedule the payments. And you can do it so that they're scheduled, but then you have to go out and manually release them. Automatic stuff can really land you in trouble unless you've got enough cash reserves. If you're tight, you got to be careful about things that are automatic. Now, let's go to the other side of the equation. That's the money going out. The other part is the money coming in. And you need to get a handle on that. And some people would say, well, how much money are you going to bring in next month? I have no idea, right? Okay, so you're going to bring in $1. Oh, no, it'll be more than that. Oh, okay. So you're going to bring in $1 million. No, there's no way we're going to bring in $1 million. So you do have an idea. It's somewhere between $1 and $1 million. Can we get a little bit tighter, right? Anyhow, there's techniques. It's scary. So this is one of the issues, is mindset. When we learn accounting, we learn math, we learn just about anything, what are we supposed to do? In school, what's the objective in school when you take a test?
Pass the test. Get the right answer.
Get the right answer. We are conditioned. It's got to be right. George, I can guarantee you will never be right. Actually, we have once in a while, we've ended up with the exact balance we forecasted. But you know what? It was coincidence because some of our expenses were higher or lower and some of our income was higher or vice versa. But not everything was anyhow. The point is you got to get over yourself and allow yourself to be wrong and to make mistakes on the forecasting. But it's better than nothing. And it's better than just throwing your hands up in the air. And over time, you'll get better and better and better. And I get more and more conservative where I'm underestimating, I'm pushing revenue out because we've got enough cash. So I'm guessing that the revenue's coming later than it does, but not by 2 weeks, but by some days, but it's rolling into the next week, or that we need to pay expenses sooner. And so I'm usually pleasantly surprised that our balances are higher than projected, which really is a relief. And over time, you can get there.
David, you mentioned reserves, cash reserves. How does one decide how much is enough to have in reserve?
That's another incredible question. And pre-COVID, people would have said, I don't need cash reserves, right? But we've all of a sudden realized that everybody can be impacted by an event or anybody by an individual event. So now to try to answer the question that you're referring to. For me, do I have enough cash reserves to run the business without any income for 3 months? Which is a lot, I know. But you look at what happened to COVID. You look at what happens after a hurricane. You look what happens any catastrophic event, and it's not all that much. Now, let's go a little bit deeper and what is considered a cash reserve. Okay. So obviously there's cash that you literally can keep in your office because sometimes you literally need cash. So let's call that $1,000 to borrow Dave Ramsey. And then a separate bank account that is a savings account, not your checking. Let's borrow it from Profit First. Put it in a different bank. And by the way, there's banks, most of them are online. You're earning 4.5% with business accounts. And again, get in touch with me if you're going, David, where in the world can I find this? It takes me time, but I collect resources. So you've got savings accounts, but you go, well, David, how in the world do I get 3 months of savings? Now, remember, I said expenses. So pare back and look at your absolute expenses. So that's rent, electricity, internet, etc. But you've also got variable expenses like meals and other stuff. You go, okay, let's scrape all those away. So now you're down to maybe what's 2 months of worth of expenses that are absolutely needed. So that's a little bit more feasible. But you still say, David, all right, I've got a month's worth of cash. It's going to take me time. So where's the next one? You've already mentioned it. Credit cards. It's a cash equivalent that's for temporary use. Now, better than credit cards is a credit line at much lower interest rates. Once in a while, hey, we've got a balance on a credit card right now that we've had for 4 months. Why? Because they're giving me 0% interest for the next year. Thank you very much. And we've got it planned exactly when we're paying it off. But credit cards, bank credit lines, it could be a rich uncle. It doesn't matter. Now, you've got to go for reliability. Which one's the most reliable? And I can think of times where, for example, home equity, tying it to like a home equity line, if housing prices decline, that can impact your availability. And we had, for those who remember, the real estate debacle of 2006, 7, 8, 9, 10 here in the United States and elsewhere in the world, people's credit lines were being eliminated, their home equity lines, with a letter from the bank. It's gone. That $500,000 line that you had, it's gone. Or it's cut in half. So if you're smelling something coming up, and it could be happening with your house in a hurricane, pull a chunk of money out and pay the 10% a month or 8%, just its interest. So those are the ways you can set up cash reserves without actually having all the cash at once.
David, I'm hearing at least a couple thoughts there that came to me while you're talking there. So when it comes to planning, thinking about your cash reserves and the different types of cash reserves, one of the issues that one needs to consider is the risk. What's the risk associated with that? So if it's my home equity loan, what happens if they take it away? Or if it's this, or if it's my rich uncle, what happens if he dies and leaves me nothing?
Right.
So the risk is something that's also, which is difficult to project.
It's difficult to project risk.
The risk.
Yeah, it is. And this is a blunt instrument, what we're talking about, but you can put it into buckets. You know, if you don't have control over credit cards, they are very, very, very high risk, right? If you don't really have control and you just, frankly, you do the best you can and you take incremental steps. This is not overnight. This could take a period of months or years to build up these cash reserves. But you say, okay, it was just like my wife and I, when we started out, it was, let's get $500 in the house. And then let's get $700. And then boom, $1,000. We hit Dave Ramsey's goal. Congratulations. And all of a sudden things literally started going better, just like he predicted. I predict that if you can get 1 week's of cash reserves set aside, that you're literally, it's out of sight, out of mind, things will start going better. And then you try for 2 weeks and 3 weeks and 4 weeks. I don't have the experience that Dave Ramsey has with thousands of people, but I do know that companies that have cash reserves that are out of sight, out of mind, sleep easier at night. And here's one of the biggies. So much of this is mental. It is a mental game. As a matter of fact, my first foray out into branding was winning the cash flow game. But we figured out quickly it wasn't going to work for various reasons. But it's a mental game. And when you can't sleep at night, you start making bad decisions. And guess what happens if you've got reserves? You can sleep at night better, right? When you've got reserves and you see this problem coming down the line, 2 months out, a month out, and you're scrambling to try to make things right, you go, okay, but at least I've got this much money in the bank, and if I need to, I can use the reserves, which happens. Again, for our business, we've got reserves, and we use them. We don't want to, but yeah, it goes out, and then we say, okay, let's have the discipline to put them back in as soon as possible. And then we grow and we grow and we grow, and we try to grow the reserves as much as we can.
So if I hear someone complaining that they don't sleep well at night, maybe I should ask them about their cash reserves, if they're appropriate, if they're sufficient.
Yeah, it's like, why? Are you having cash flow issues? Now, this is another interesting thing. A lot of business owners want to know what cash flow issues is. That term isn't really well known by a lot of people. It's vague. But if you say, are you having enough issues having enough money in the bank to pay your bills? That everybody understands.
David, you have a generous offer for listeners at your site online, and that is the 24 profit strategies for business success. That's a free guide that they can find, and the website is CIC60.com, and you can find that link in the description below. David, as we prepare to wrap up, if you could sit down, and perhaps this has happened already, and you're talking to a business owner who can't sleep at night, who's facing issues with their cash flow, what 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice do you give them to get out of that well that they've fallen into?
Yeah. Well, the first piece of advice may seem self-serving, but find somebody who knows what they're doing to help, who's actually done this type of work before. And I'm not saying call me, they could, but they could call me and say, David, I don't want to work with you. Do you have somebody closer to me that I've trained people to do this? But to go to somebody who does taxes all year, that's what they do. They can't help you. Even somebody who does bookkeeping and accounting type bookkeeping. I get referrals from accountants because they don't know what they're doing. And be careful when people start saying that they can help. You got to ask, have they ever done this before? So that's number one, get help, because the stress comes off when you have somebody who can help you. All right. So that's one. Number 2, breathe. You've got to be able to think clearly and take a look at reality. Set aside your accounting for now and try to do a cash flow model that tells you when are you spending money and when is it coming in, so you can see the reality and then make logical decisions of which expenses can you push out. Everybody can push out their phone bill for 30 to 60 days. No phone company is going to shut you off the day you go overdue, right? And which receivables can you bring in? All right, that's a couple things. But then also, and there's probably some things on this 24 strategies. I've got 220, George, so I can't keep track of it all. But the third one is, after you set up the model, look for assets that might be on your balance sheet that you can dispose of quickly. Now, here's one of the challenges. It's a mental problem. When I've suggested this, sell your excess inventory at a steep discount. No, I'm going to lose money. Well, good, because then you got a write-off. You need to pay your bills. You need to make payroll. The state will shut you down. That's why part of the reason payroll is so critical. You're breaking the law. And so it's a huge issue. It's not a moral issue only, but they have this, no, I'm going to lose money. good. Save some money on taxes. It's in there. Your cash is buried in your inventory. I found off-books assets. There's all sorts of stuff that companies find that they can sell. That would be the other one. I've even said, go find a competitor and sell it to your competitor. Brand new stuff. Okay, make it a competitor who's outside of your trade market. They live 100 miles away and your market's 25 miles. So what? You're helping them out. Maybe they'll do that for you next time. Anyhow, part of the issue is you asked me for 3 things. It's like, no, I can't do 3. I got to do 10 or 20.
Priceless advice. My guest today is David Safir, reminding you that cash flow is reality. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.